Hi, this is Shay Cunningham. Thank you for joining me today as we discuss behavioral economics. As similar theories and models that we have discussed, we will follow the same objectives. That being, we will give a brief overview of behavioral economics, followed by the concepts of this model. We will then also integrate a health behavior. Instead of COVID, as we've talked about before, this time we're going to integrate the application of healthy lifestyle, weight management specifically. We'll then discuss the strengths and weaknesses of behavioral economics, followed by a personal application. So let's go ahead and get started. Behavioral economics is an intervention method looking at how we really act. It does not assume we are rational individuals, as many of the previous theories and models we've discussed have that premise. Behavioral economics also states that poor decisions are errors, and they're not actually latent rational decisions. Before behavioral economics, really in contrast, is neoclassical economics, which is based on the expectant utility theory. And this theory, the expected utility theory, states that individuals make rational decisions based on what benefits them the most. However, this has a few limitations. Again, we go back to that people are rational. So that's where this is also a premise. It also states that individuals base their decisions pretty much from their own self-interest, which is not necessarily the case. And then it also states that our preferences are stable over time and they do not change, which we also know is not necessarily accurate. And behavioral economics is born out of the prospect theory, and this theory answers many questions which and gaps that the utility theory does not address. And as we go through the different frameworks, the framework and different concepts of behavioral economics, I have really watered this down. Behavioral economics is just like, out of all the theories, this is just like whoosh, way over my head. I think as soon as we use the word economics, my brain just goes whoosh. Maybe it's a part of semantics. So bear with me. This is very much layman's terms here. Okay, so behavioral economics first starts out with the idea of utility for money. So the first part of this states that people will be more conservative with their decision making when they can benefit, when that outcome is for them. And when I say conservative, what I mean is they're not willing to gamble as much, and they're willing to go more for the sure thing. So with that, like an example would be, there's a 50-50 chance of gaining $100 or nothing versus definitely getting $50. So most people will just take the sure thing. Just give me the $50. I don't want to risk it. Like, sure thing here. The other part of this is that people will be more risk-taking with their decision-making when they do not benefit. So they're willing to take the gamble when there's something to lose. So in this scenario, there's a 50-50 chance of losing $100 or definitely losing $50. Well, people don't want to lose anything, right? They definitely don't want to definitely lose something. So they're going to take the gamble. Like, okay, let's do the 50-50 here. Let's take the risk. The book describes that there is a ratio and margins. I'm not going to get into that again, way over my head. So that would be the utility for money. Also states, which I think this is a fantastic point, is that outcomes are relative to where you start, right? So your starting point it will depend on your perceived gain or loss. So what I like to think of is like, you can talk about money. I think about like where you live. So this is neutral. This is neutral. So let's say you are, or actually let's go with like, this is a $250,000 house, $250,000 house. So let's say you are starting out at a studio or efficiency, like 400 square feet. Okay, so that's a big gain. That's a big difference, right? So then let's say you're getting the video here. This is a $2 million house. So that's a loss, right? So it's really the same. It's the same thing right here. It's a $2 million house, but where you're starting from, it's all relative. Now, the impact also varies depending on where you're starting. So let's say you're starting not at the studio, but you're starting at like maybe a 2-bedroom apartment. So still going up to a $250,000 house, that's a gain. And then let's say you're at a $100,000 house, that's still a gain. However, it's still incremental. It's still a relative change, but the impact is different. Okay, so we're at the $2 million house. So big a loss. Now we're at the $1 million house. Not as big of a loss. Now we're at the $150,000 house. I'm in my Benadryl haze again. Sorry, $1 million house to $250,000 house, right? So that's not going to be as big of a loss. Still a loss, but the impact is very different. Okay, so we're going to leave that. Now we're going to talk about the framework of the behavioral economics. To emphasize, there are no real formal constructs. We're going to actually deal more with concepts of behavioral economics. The first is discounting. So people will discount outcomes that are further off in time versus things that are present. So I think of this as immediate gratification versus delayed gratification. We want things in the here and now, and we're more likely to engage in behavior when it's present, or when the outcomes, when we get the benefit in the here and now. We're less likely to engage in behavior when the rewards, when the benefits are further out. When we think of lifestyle changes, it's why weight loss pills and fad diets are so popular, because it promises change right now, versus when you think that you have to adapt exercise regimens or diets, you see those benefits more in the long term. That's why people are less likely to engage in that behavior. Asymmetrical paternalism. This is the idea that we allow freedom of choice while still encouraging healthy behavior. This is when we think about possibly supermarkets and how they place their food. So what we have in the line of vision will have healthier choices. You still have the option to purchase unhealthier items, your cookies and your crackers and your snacks and your chips, but you have to actually seek those out. And then the same techniques that are used to increase unhealthy behavior can actually be used to promote healthy behavior. So we think of like impulse buys at the cash registers. So and I have this at the store that I go to. So you can have, like, we have our little candy bars, but then you also have the option to buy bananas and apples. So those are right next to each other. You also think that you have like sodas in the coolers, and then you also have water. So you have both the options, and then you have that free will to choose. This is when we get into an ethical dilemma. So are we deciding and dictating behavior for people? Where do we draw the line? Because people are more likely to engage in behavior when there's a default. So we think of organ donation, when you have to opt out, people will not do so. So where do we draw the line here? Also, we think of decision paralysis. So are we offering people too many decisions? Are we getting to the point where we're bombarding society with so many decisions that they don't know, that they end up not choosing? So that's also something to contemplate. A fifth aspect of the framework of behavioral economics is incentives. We've talked about this before in our other models and theories. This is rewards to encourage healthy behaviors. And the delivery method of the incentives can actually have a greater impact than the magnitude of the incentive. And also the frequency can also have a greater impact than the amount. We can think of this as like employee wellness programs, rewarding employees through a cash benefit or something like that, by decreasing their BMI, losing a certain amount of weight. But again, this does raise a bit of an ethical concern, because are we encouraging kind of latently unhealthy behavior? Because what about these people who are already engaging in healthy behavior? There's no incentive for them to continue to do so, and there's no reward for them for previously doing so. So that's also something to consider. We also have present bias. So this is that we, the overweight of immediate costs versus in the future, in a similar, and this is in the similar vein of discounting. I think of this as procrastination. So it's easier to start something tomorrow than it is today. We can always think of an excuse in the present moment to put something off. So I think of diets. It's like, oh, you know what? Tomorrow I am going to start all over, and I'm going to eat all the good food, and I'm going to eat, 3 balanced meals, all that kind of stuff. And then, I'm not going to do any cheats. And then tomorrow comes and it's like, oh, I forgot. I said I was going to go out with my best friend, and we were going to go to dinner and just have a couple drinks. And then, and then you have dessert and you have appetizers and all that kind of stuff. So that is kind of an idea of present bias. Over optimism. We just are over optimistic about our outcomes, especially when it comes to self-control. It's Girl Scout season, guys. We just think, yeah, you know what? We're just going to eat like one serving, like 3 Girl Scout cookies, 3 Thin Mints, and and then all of a sudden, like half a sleeve is gone in one sitting, right? So we are over optimistic about our self-control. Loss aversion, there's a greater emphasis on loss than the equal gain. So I think of this as going off track on our diets. And our healthy eatings, healthy lifestyle. So again, we're going to go back to that neutral here. So we think about like, oh my gosh, I ate all those Girl Scout cookies. Oh my gosh, where did those Thin Mints go? So there's that. But we ate like same amount of like healthy food of like, man, but you had that salmon and that asparagus. So the loss versus the gain really equal, but we focus on those thin mints, right? And it really feels like way down there. So it is that loss aversion. We're putting more emphasis on those thin mints than we are on the salmon and the asparagus. The peanuts effect, another framework concept of behavioral economics. This is the emphasis of small changes over time instead of focusing on gains and losses. I really think of this as like habit changing. So it's these small incremental changes that happen that end up into larger sustainable behavior changes. I also think of it kind of as Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, kind of going off track for a minute of healthy behavior. You don't start out a second grader teaching them calculus, right? So you start, with addition and subtraction, then you go to division, multiplication, and algebra and geometry. So you start building. You don't start big. You have to start small, and then it builds out. So that's kind of a similar concept to Peanuts effects. So when we think about a healthy lifestyle, adapting that, again, I'm not nutritionist, dietitian, anything like that, but we're going to start with those small increments. So we may be like, hey, you know what, let's start out with adding, incorporating more vegetables, and then we'll slowly let's work on decreasing refined sugars. So it's these small changes that end up making a massive effect and sustainable in that too. Regret aversion. So this is the anticipated regret can affect a preventable behavior. So nobody likes regret. Nobody enjoys saying, if only I had, right? Something we all want to avoid. So this might be something like we see a friend who has an unhealthy lifestyle and they suffer a heart attack. So almost that vicarious experience, we then may change our behavior and start adapting a healthier lifestyle. We may start exercising, eating healthier. So that may influence our behavior. Finally, rational world bias. So this is on behalf of public policy makers as well as health professionals designing and implementing programs under the assumption that individuals are rational, which, as we've discussed, this is not true. So, a prime example is that we're designing programs that people are always going to choose healthy options, that they're always going to choose the apple over Thin Mints. So, as you can tell, I haven't gotten my Girl Scout cookies yet. So we're now going to go on to the strengths and weaknesses. One of the strengths is, again, as we've mentioned, this behavioral economics addresses that we are not rational. And again, we've mentioned this over and over again in this discussion. Also, this behavioral economics, it addresses that, this just like nudges people to make healthy choices. A couple weaknesses, and we've discussed this throughout as well. The ethical concerns. So are we limiting people's free will? Are we dictating their behavior? Where do we draw the line here? Also, what happens when people need more than a nudge? So, how do we address that? How do we make policies and implement programs, design programs for people who need a little bit more direction? So we're going to leave you with an application today, kind of actually going back to the COVID idea that we've discussed before, and integrate that with asymmetrical paternalism. So as we've seen in many places, we've had COVID-19 vaccine mandates. So, what is the ethics behind that? So, is it ethical? So we still allowed free choice. You could get the vaccine. You didn't have to necessarily, but there were some restaurants that said you can't come in unless we see a vaccine card. So you could still maybe get like curbside, but you couldn't dine in. So what is that? Okay, is it not? What about jobs? If you were a health professional working in a hospital, you had to get vaccinated. So again, you didn't have to, but you would have to find new employment. So from that framework, that's something to consider, the ethics of that. So that concludes our discussion of behavioral economics, and I think we just got a couple more discussions left, and then it's going to be the end of the semester. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.